There are a number of considerations in getting a custom bicycle: specs, ride qualities, and of course, the builder. This video introduces a builder with over 20 years of experience who has designed and built thousands of bicycles, including Rivendell, Schwinn Paramount, and Waterframe. He now builds and teaches frame building in his full-service bicycle shop in southwestern Wisconsin. Meet John Sotherland.
My first bicycle riding experience is when I found a bicycle on the sidewalk when I was 5. I went out in the morning to do my usual playing, and there was a bike laying there. No training wheels, it was a little bike. And I picked that thing up and I rode it all day. And my mom asked me where I got that bike. And I told her I found it on the sidewalk out front. She said, "You go put that bike right back where you found it." We had 5 children in the family and there wasn't a lot of money. And my parents told me that everybody got a new bike when they were 10. I had to wait until I was 10 before I got my first bike. So even though it was a very happy day and a wonderful moment of freedom and personal growth, I had to wait twice as long as I'd been alive before I could have my own. So it was a happy thing and a difficult thing at the same time. My parents told me that they'd buy the bike, but if I wanted to ghost ride it or abuse it or whatever, I had to pay for everything after the purchase. So that gave me a lot of respect for taking care of something that was given to me. Being out in the woods or at the gravel pit or at the kettle moraine was a possibility with having a bicycle, as long as I was home on time. It allowed me to have friends that were outside of the neighborhood, and that helped as I got older and went to middle school and high school, not just grade school. So it was a source of freedom and a source of pride. I was in the Air Force. I was a computer technician in the mid-70s to 1980, 76 to 80, and rode the bike the whole time. I had a 3-speed on base, my base cruiser, and the nice thing about riding a bicycle on base is you didn't have to wear a hat, and which normally you'd be out of uniform in big trouble. So it was kind of an act of defiance, but it was within the rules, so it was another form of freedom with the bicycle. When I got out of the Air Force in 1980, I did a solo bike ride from Great Falls, Montana to Waukesha, and it was over 100 miles a day. My bike was over 100 pounds, and it gave me a really good base for competition. That gave me a lot of good base miles. I had 10,000 miles in that year, and I had scratched the itch of bike touring pretty good, but I wanted to find out where I fit in with competitive cycling. I joined a patio bike shop, Lakefield Cycling Club in Milwaukee, and developed, I worked my way up. I was a senior Cat 3 after 9 years of racing, and I was humbled many times. Had a couple of good days, but it was another element of another itch that needed to be scratched, filling in bicycling, the use of bicycles, not just fixing them so I'm trying to fill this whole circle of bicycling things so I have a better understanding. I went back to college. I studied business at UW-Whitewater, where I met my future wife. She was the prettiest girl on campus with the nicest bike, so we did a lot of riding together. We eloped on a tandem, and when I was studying, I had time to work, of course, and I worked at a bike shop while I was going to college, and I also was riding competitively. Another one of my bicycling goals was to learn how to frame build. So there's riding the bike, there's fixing bikes, but to me the ultimate thing was to be able to make a bike. And I had purchased a Reynolds tube set when I was in college working at the bike shop, but I had to wait for 5 years before I could turn that box of tubes into a frame. I had been trying to get a job at the Schwinn Paramount facility, which was in Waterford, Wisconsin, and eventually got a slot First I was a machinist, then I made forks, 50th anniversary bikes, 1987, 88. And then from there I had the opportunity to apply my college education and my fabricating skills combined as a QC manager at the last Schwinn plant in the United States, which was in Greenville, Mississippi. From there, I worked there for 3.5 years. They eventually closed the plant. Schwinn was losing ground at that point. It was 1993 is when they went through bankruptcy. But when they closed the plant in Greenville, I closed the plant on Friday and went to corporate in downtown Chicago on Monday. I was one of the only people out of 240 people that kept a job, so I was very grateful of being kept by Schwinn. And I was the specifications manager in the engineering department, which means I managed the bill of material, which is every part on every bike has, down to the decals and everything, anyway, has a blueprint and a part number on the bill of material, which I maintained. And with the background of statistical process control, which I learned in college, SPC statistics, and applied in Greenville, Mississippi, and manufacturing, of course, that I learned from the old guys from Chicago. I was sent overseas to Hungary, Japan, and Taiwan to check on production of bikes and products that were being made for Schwinn. In 1992, I got transferred from Chicago back to Schwinn Paramount. When Schwinn went through bankruptcy, Waterford Paramount became Waterford Precision Cycles. And from that point, there's all the dealers that were buying Paramounts didn't know what was going to happen with Waterford, were they going to be around. So there was a lot of skepticism over if we're going to deliver, if we're going to be around in 5 years. So a lot of the guys were let go. And there were basically 7 of us remaining, and I was the guy that was making the bikes and the forks. And then we built up from there. And when we started having more demand, we brought back some of the guys that had previously worked at Paramount and started building up production again. We hired new people. We hired some people from Trek that were welders. We started welding production. The Standard Bicycle Company, BMX bikes were being fabricated there. That was in the welding department. So I went from being a fabricator, frame builder, to a guy that is training the new guys also. Some guys moved on, some guys were not brought back, and so we had to basically build the factory up from scratch again. So I did a lot of training as part of my job description. Some people had skills. They could weld or they could do machining, but they didn't know how to make bicycles. So what I did is I created process sheets, basically a cookbook, a recipe for this is how to make bikes the way Waterford, Paramount need to have the bikes made. Here's the steps, here's the quality tolerances and requirements that are required to go from one step to the next, and here's what the final inspection is going to be like. So literally there were over 100 people in the time that I was there from 93 until 2000 that I either trained or worked with, primarily trained. I was not the only trainer, but I did a significant amount of the training of the builders that went through. Another neat thing of the Waterford experience for me was making Rivendell's, because I'm a big fan of Grant Peterson's philosophy of his writings. He's fun to read. And there were a few of us that were fabricating Rivendell's. We had Rivendell Road, Long Low, and mountain bikes, and it was the all-rounder at that point. And there was not enough consistency from builder to builder to satisfy Grant. Grant's very particular, and so at that point I made all of the Rivendell's. So it was I still have one Rivendell all-rounder that I'm quite fond of, and I still enjoy reading Grant's work, and I still like his philosophy on steel bikes and on the practicality aspects of the use of bicycles. One of my goals when I was at Waterford, obviously, was to incorporate bike shop, business, and fabricating into one thing, and that's owning a bike shop. To apply all of these things, the full circle of what I'd learned, and see how I could do in the world. And so in the year 2000, my wife and I started Bicycle Wise and Sports Fitness in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and later on, after we had developed the business enough, built a house, and there I had a place to fabricate, and eventually we were able to purchase a building, which we're in currently at 1155 West Main Street, where I moved my frame shop to, and so now I can wear several hats in one building, which makes it a lot easier to switch from fabricating to retail. So that's where we are today.